During a time when Americans rarely considered how people of other cultures live their lives, one person proved that understanding cultures is essential to understanding your own. This was Margaret Mead. Margaret Mead's exploration of societies in the South Pacific demonstrated how human behavior varies based on culture, revolutionizing both American viewpoints and modern anthropology. Mead's interest in anthropology began at a young age. Born in Philadelphia on December 16, 1901, to progressive social scientist parents, Mead's curiosity was sparked through studies of her mother's. Mead was an observant child. Because her parents were both educators, Mead was taught to contemplate the world around her and kept several journals documenting her life. When it came time to go to college, Mead attended DePauw University for a year, later transferring to Barnard in 1920. After receiving her bachelor's degree in psychology from Barnard, Mead went on to Columbia University to get her master's degree, also in psychology. Later, while taking classes from Franz Boas, a well-known anthropologist, and his assistant Ruth Benedict at Columbia, Mead decided to pursue a PhD in anthropology, the study of humans and their culture. Anthropology had begun to materialize in the 1860s after Charles Darwin's theory of evolution linked human ancestry to apes. Darwin's discovery led to many scientists exploring what was called evolutionist anthropology, which involved studying universal biological ideas. However, Boas looked at anthropology a different way, studied humanity through different cultures. This was called social anthropology, a new idea in the 1920s. Even outside of anthropology, the 1920s was a revolutionary period in America because of the great changes in societal norms and new cultural ideas. However, the emergence of the Great Depression caused hard times, especially for children and teens, who were expected to work long hours in order to support their families. Stereotypes were prevalent during this time as well. People of color, immigrants, and people of certain religions were discriminated against. Women, although granted the vote, were still denied many freedoms. Mead would soon refute many of the cultural stereotypes in America. Her experience with fieldwork, a modern anthropological idea, began in 1925. Boas decided to send her to American Samoa, an isolated island outside of the modern world. The overarching purpose of the study was to determine whether human behavior was primarily biologically or culturally induced. Mead's focus was on adolescent girls. Through conversing with 68 girls and taking notes, Mead discovered that Samoans had a much easier transition into adulthood than American teens. Samoan culture was more open sexually, and teens often had many sexual relationships. Society was also more carefree for teens, and Mead found that Samoan teens lacked the typical anger and storminess of those of America. This led Mead to believe the unwillingness to let American teens grow up at their own pace or teach them about love, sex, and birth was a cultural norm, negatively impacting American teens' development. Mead returned to America in 1926 and in 1928 published Coming of Age in Samoa, a book describing her research and conclusions about adolescence. The book quickly gained popularity in America. Following the publishing of her book in 1928, Mead set off for her next field study, this time in Manus, Papua New Guinea. She wanted to study children in pre-literate cultures and whether their development depended on their environment. Through collecting over 35,000 drawings made by children of New Guinea, Mead found children drew only realistic depictions of life around them, despite the supernatural being a big part of adult life in the culture. Based on the study, Mead refuted the idea that animism is a universal developmental stage, as the children do not believe in the supernatural. She also argued against the idea that primitive societies are more childlike because what is considered childlike depends on the culture. Mead published the book Growing Up in New Guinea to describe her research in 1930, which was another successful book in the market. In 1931, Mead decided to return to New Guinea with her then-husband Gregory Bateson. She and Bateson wanted to study and compare three tribes in the Sepik region, the Arapesh, the Budugamor, and the Chambuli. Her goal was to find out what their gender roles were determined based on culture. Through her field research among the tribes, Mead found that the three tribes had very different standards for male and female behavior. In the Arapesh tribe, women and men were both peaceful and calm, a trait associated with women in America. The opposite was shown in the Mundugamor tribe, where both men and women were more aggressive and combative. The Chambuli tribe was the most surprising, as women were the dominant gender. The men relied on them and were very emotional, a characteristic linked to women in America. This led Mead to draw the conclusion that gender roles were largely culturally determined, going against the American view at the time that women were inferior biologically. Her book, Sex and Temperament in Three Primitive Societies, published in 1935, described this study. It was the third of Mead's over 20 published books. Mead's work was far from over. One of her later major trips occurred from 1936 to 39 in Bali, and was centered around culture's effect on personality. Mead and Bateson compiled 35,000 pictures and 33,000 feet of film to demonstrate Balinese culture, rituals, and interactions. This original idea of visual anthropology was appreciated by many anthropologists as well as the general public. After Mead conducted many field studies, World War II began in 1941, making travel to the South Pacific impossible. During this time, Mead remained in America, focusing her fieldwork on the war. Mead was influential during the war, contributing to efforts by researching the purposes of war, food distribution, and how to maintain morale. In her later years, Mead focused on American culture, teaching at many universities, publishing many books, and working as a curator at the American Museum of Natural History. She returned to the South Pacific in the 1950s to study changes in primitive life. Due to her fieldwork and books, Mead became a well-known anthropologist, one of the most famous of her time. She traveled around the country, dedicating her time to speaking on international problems such as women's rights, parenting, education, sexuality, racism, drugs, pollution, and war. A main part of Mead's lectures focused on the importance of understanding other cultures and how Americans can learn from them.
The word tolerate's a good word to use if a Republican's thinking about a Democrat, or a Democrat about a Republican. They got to tolerate each other's differences because they feel differently about important things. People of different religions have to tolerate their differences of opinion. But other cultures are other whole things, other whole ways of life which we have to learn to appreciate.
One of Mead's most promising messages to society during her time was that culture and societal norms can be changed. During a period of time when many citizens had given up hope for change in society, Mead was convinced social problems could be overcome.
Human culture is something that people have built up historically. It's different from other people's just because of the historical conditions, and also it's something we can change.
Though many valued Mead's work, she was also a controversial figure. Many people viewed her ideas on women's rights, sexual life, and other topics as radical and absurd, mainly because many Americans still had traditional mindsets. Her book, Coming of Age in Samoa, was particularly controversial. Derek Freeman, another anthropologist, traveled to Samoa and found the way Samoans lived conflicting with the life Mead had described. He wrote a book criticizing Mead's ideas, research method, and accuracy. Freeman and other anthropologists also argued Mead's conclusions were drawn from little evidence just to make her point. Whether Mead's critics are correct or not, there is no doubting Mead's impact on society. The exchange of her modern ideas revolutionized the way Americans viewed culture and international topics. She made anthropology a more well-known and approachable subject through her easily readable books. Margaret Mead died on November 15, 1978 with 28 honorary doctorates and is the president of many scientific organizations. Praised by many, she was awarded the Presidential Medal of Freedom following her death. Even today, Margaret Mead's mark on society is great. Her fieldwork shaped modern anthropology through her novel research methods, such as her photographic analysis of Bali. In addition, her contention that traits are culturally inherited revolutionized the way anthropologists today approach their studies. Considered a leader in the feminist and sexuality movements, Mead's advocacy on social issues has impacted American viewpoints. Because she is viewed as an expert and a role model, she has helped remove prejudices and misconceptions. Her revolutionary point that human behavior is influenced by culture still inspires change today. Many community organizations today use her famous quote on changing the world as a mantra to support their work, such as the November Coalition, a group advocating for citizens imprisoned on drug charges. Mead, seen as one of the most famous anthropologists of the 20th century, is still honored today in America. A Margaret Mead commemorative stamp was released in 1998, and a Margaret Mead Award is given out to one young anthropologist each year. Mead's exploration of cultures at a humanitarian rather than biological level, as well as her social impact on society, were monumental and are still recognized today.